with lonerism and the first album Inner Speaker, that sound, that psychedelic rock sound made him an indie star. It earned him a Grammy nomination, and he completely went a different direction.
Currents is psychedelic, dancey, groovy, yet still clings to rock and roll roots.
The fact that this is coming from some 20 something, guy from Western Australia is kind of like, how did this come from this man's head, right?
Yeah.
Currents by Tame Impala. This is Tame Impala's third studio album. This was released on July 17th, 2015. So this is a 10-year-old album at this point, which is crazy to think of. Released by Interscope Records in the US and Fiction Records in the United Kingdom. I find this album to be fascinating for many reasons, and we're going to talk about it today by asking ourselves 10 questions that we can explore this through. And the first question that we always kick these conversations off with is, what makes this album interesting? And you and I are a little different in the fact of how much we had listened to Tame Impala in the past. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on this. What makes Currents interesting to you as someone who probably didn't spend as much time over the years like obsessed with this band like I have been?
Well, I would say what makes Currents interesting is what makes Tame Impala interesting is Tame Impala just has this unique sound that doesn't sound like anything else. If a song played somewhere, a Tame Impala song played somewhere, and you'd never heard that song before, you would still immediately know, okay, this is Tame Impala. So I think their sound is interesting. I think Kevin Parker writes great songs. Currents is psychedelic, dancey, groovy, yet still clings to rock and roll roots. And so I think it makes for a very interesting album.
For me, it's the first album that Kevin Parker did everything on. Now, he's usually playing all the instruments, but this also included production, mixing, obviously the recording. He did record this in Ableton. You and I have talked about, there are a lot for people that are Tame Impala fans, there's an endless like production geek angle that you could take with Tame Impala. I won't go deep into that, but you and I have talked about like DAWs, digital audio workstations that people use to record. He used Ableton for this. He abandoned a sound. With Currents, he completely went a different direction that made him, with lonerism and the first album Inner Speaker, that sound, that psychedelic rock sound made him an indie star. It earned him a Grammy nomination, and he completely went a different direction. So in a sense, he kind of went deeper. I mean, this is a one-man show here from top to bottom. He went deeper into himself, I guess, and risked alienating his fan base because of his embrace of a new sound. And it totally paid off. And that those types of choices don't always pay off for artists. To that end, I think this is one of the best examples where indie crossed into the mainstream, or something like the mainstream. Rihanna covered a song off of this record. A lot of people have covered songs off of this record, and it's just massively popular on a global scale. All that said, I don't know if Currents is so entirely different that it sounds like a different artist. To your point, Kevin Parker is very distinct, and it's his sound. Tame Impala's sound is very distinct, and it's tempting to look at Currents and the commercial success that it has and think of it as like slicker and less experimental, but I don't think that's entirely accurate. When I revisit Tame Impala's discography, it feels like this is a more natural evolution than I remembered. The vocals are a bit cleaner. There are more synths, there are fewer guitars, but these are the same sensibilities. They're the same musical instincts that gave us Inner Speaker and Lonerism. By the way, Lonerism, one of my favorite all-time albums. I think it's amazing. And with Currents, I was so drawn to the singles when they came out. I wasn't even thinking about it as an album until time went on and I would revisit it. But this is also just an unusual album in many ways. I mean, the intro song alone, "Let It Happen," is just this wild, trippy opener. It's like a bold choice as an opener. There are plenty of these short songs like "Nangs" and "Gossip," almost more sound like unfinished sketches. And a song like "Disciples" retains that lo-fi, trippy, psychedelic feel from early records. Almost sounds like Ariel Pink in its lo-finess. Of course, this is also a breakup album, one of the most classic breakup albums. And there's this whole melodrama behind that breakup. Kevin Parker was dating Melody Prochet, who was a Melody's Echo Chamber. By the way, he produced her first album, which is an amazing album. And she also had an album that was kind of a breakup album not too long after that, which was, I think it's called Bon Voyage. So Kevin wrote this album in the wake of that breakup. And also while he was rekindling his romance with his eventually to be wife, who he'd known since they were like 13 or something like that. So there's just a lot of layers to this album. I think it's fascinating that here's this indie band that's, in it, just like a lot of the other indie bands that I like as far as like their reach and their popularity. And then they just explode with this album that wasn't necessarily always destined to be when you choose to do everything yourself and you choose to make some pretty different decisions than you would on the two albums that kind of set you up for success. You were exposed to Inner Speaker right around the time it came out. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, yeah. A buddy burnt me a copy of Inner Speaker and gave it to me right around the time it was released, and I spent a lot of time with that album. And then just lost track of Tame Impala and never really got into any more of their albums. And so with Currents, when you said, "Hey, let's do an episode where we discuss Currents," I was not familiar with this album at all. So that's fun. But I've just been listening to it the last 3 weeks, and so I'm a noob to Currents and these tracks.
I remember Inner Speaker as well. It was, for me, it completely like blew me away. Immediately felt a kinship with this band at a time when guitar bands seemed to be sort of a dying breed. Tame Impala was a real shot in the arm. Like I said, Lonerism, I still think is just this amazing album. It's kind of like of that era. I get if some people prefer Inner Speaker, but for me, Lonerism sort of encapsulates what he was doing in that era of Tame Impala's career. I don't believe I took Currents in like as an album initially. Like I said, it was more, I'm picking up on the singles, but I did keep up with it. At the time, you couldn't avoid those singles. They were everywhere. And then over time, I would want to hear them and I would go listen to the album again and again. And it kind of revealed itself over time. I do think this album, for some folks, and me included, and maybe you included, I don't know, we'll find out, but feel like this is kind of a grower, like this one can kind of grow on you. That can take us to conversation about standout tracks on this album. And I am curious, as someone who you probably weren't like plugged into all of these things when they came out, what are the tracks when you listen to it that you enjoyed the most?
Let It Happen,
Yeah.
The Moment, The Less I Know, the Better,
Yeah.
'Cause I'm a Man, Reality and Motion.
Yes.
Those
I
were
have a
my
lot of
standout
those.
tracks.
I have a lot of those same ones too. I mean, Let It Happen is like, dude, who opens an album like that? And it is just sick. You have that drop like in the middle of the song and it just becomes something else entirely. It is just like this wicked, gnarly intro that is unexpected. I could totally see a version of this where he makes a different choice to be, maybe eventually would, if someone else were creating the track list, it's like, okay, we have to start with eventually, because of that riff that it opens it up. But Let It Happen is such like this trance-like way to start out an album. So I love that. Also, I mean, all the singles would be Let It Happen, Because I'm a Man, eventually, The Less I Know, the Better. And The Less I Know, the Better is definitely like the breakout of this album. It's the thing that kind of, I think, caught on the most and is maybe the most recognizable Tame Impala song for a whole generation of listeners. I love Disciples. I know I mentioned it before. but it's just this quirky little song that it almost feels reminiscent of more like some of the earlier Tame Impala work. Like I said, there's a strong Ariel Pink vibe for me on that song, which is always fun. I think this is one of the albums for me, like I said, does grow on me over time. The more listen to it, the more I find myself gravitating towards tracks, like you said, The Moment, or Reality in Motion. I think those are both great choices. I really enjoyed those. When you listen to this, I know that you and I have talked a little bit about this isn't normally a type of thing you gravitate to with heavily treated vocals that have a lot of effects going on. And for me, that also, even though I love that and it was a selling point of me, for me, when I was listening to Tame Impala, especially early on, it did obscure the lyrics a little bit, where you don't always understand. It's not always clear to understand what he's saying without reading up on it. So I actually had to do a lot of reading to find out my favorite lyric on the album. But I ended up going with a lyric from Reality in Motion, which was trying to be patient, but I'm feeling ancient, trying to control the way that I'm facing. Suppose I don't care anymore. Fate can decide I can ignore. I'll just pretend that I always knew that I had the chance to. That's the lyric. There are a lot of good lyrics on this. I mean, it's a breakup album, so it's going to be filled with good lyrics. But what lyrics stood out to you on Currents?
Once again, as it takes a hold, I'm aware I'm not in control. You see, I have a conscience and it's never fooled, but it's prone to be overruled. You want to know why I always think I'm right? Can never accept defeat and let it slide. I have no voice if I don't speak my mind. My weakness is the source of all my pride. I'll tell you why. Because I'm a man, woman.
Dude, what about that song? I mean, it's just like this. It's just like this sultry '70s soul song almost, right? Like, and the
Yeah.
lyrics are so good. I mean, it's like that song. The fact that this is coming from some 20 something, guy from Western Australia is kind of like, how did this come from this man's head, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love this song. The first time I ever heard this song, I like did a double take and I was like, "Wait a minute, what the heck are we talking about here? Is this like a trans pride anthem or
Because I'm a man, woman,
yeah." And
right?
then I was like, "Oh, okay, let me read the lyrics here. Never has there been more important punctuation than in the chorus of this song." Yeah. No, you're exactly right. The groove of this song is like this 70s, like, and he sings in falsetto anyway. So the way he sings is just perfect for that song. But yeah, these lyrics are so fun and funny, and it's like sometimes that's the only excuse we have. It's like, I don't know, I'm a man.
The other fun thing too is like if I think about, we always ask when we do these deep dives, what's the peak moment of the album? And for me, because I'm a man, could be that. But at the same time, like sometimes you listen to an album that's front loaded with songs, or the middle is sort of the best part of it, and then it kind of fades away toward the end. But I mean, even the closing song on this album, "New Person, Same Old Mistakes," uh, that could be a single. Like it could be a single. It could kind of be the crux of the album. It could totally be earlier in the album and be a selling point. But it's sort of the way that the album goes out, and I feel like that's a pretty powerful closer. So if I'm looking at peak moments, I could think of, okay, yeah, it could be because I'm a man that stretch there toward the end, or it could just be the end of the album. Could be the peak. New Person, Same Old Mistakes. What did you, when you're listening to it, was there a peak moment in Currents?
I had to go with gosh, let me the less I know the better. Is that what that song's
Mm,
called? I had to
yeah.
go with that song because I just think, man, when I sit down to listen to Currents, I'm like, I can't wait till it gets to that song. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with that song. I love when we do episodes on albums that I have no frame of reference for, just like this album, because I learn about the album while we're doing the episode, and while you're talking, I'm learning new things about the album. And so I didn't know that the less I know, the better is like just just this giant song. So I'm like, when I learn things like that, I'm like, oh, good, my taste is validated. But yeah, I'm obsessed with that song. Um, so that's the peak moment for me.
The bass line of that song. I mean, it's the selling point, right? It's like everything seems to be built around that, but that bass is just so sick, you know? I mean, and the guy recorded so much of this just with pretty basic materials. He had lost a lot of, or not lost, but I think a lot of his equipment was being shipped from one tour to another tour, and he's just at his home studio, which is where he records all this stuff. By the way, watch some live videos of Tame Impala, like in this period or even other periods of the career. But he was at his home. I mean, it's overlooking the ocean. It's like beautiful, this beautiful like haven that the guy can record from. But he would just get obsessive, and he would, he would drink and smoke all night and just try to numb himself to any outside thoughts. I feel like is the general vibe I get when I hear him talk about this. And that song is just like, what frame of mind? Again, it's kind of like, it's like, what frame of mind did this guy get himself to where he's pumping out this type of stuff? It's really incredible, and the whole album is filled with these moments that, again, for me, it's like when I first heard the album 10 years ago, I didn't pay attention to the moment, and now I'm listening to it, and I'm like, is this my favorite song on the album? Like it does that. It kind of like, these songs are infectious like that. And you'll get a melody in your head and you're like, which song is that again? And you have to go find it. And you're like, oh man, that might be my new favorite.
And it's the moment. The moment is the
Yeah.
one that's stuck in my head all the time. When I wake up and I hear Tame Impala in my head, I'm like you. I'm like, oh, what song is that? And it's always the moment. So then I'm like, so is that the best song on there since it's always stuck in my head?
The other thing that the album kind of does, it is very dreamlike. And I mean, sure, it has that synth pop thing that is going on, but and a bit of the psychedelia too. But it kind of is like especially when you first hear it, it's almost like a fever dream. And I've heard a criticism of this album being, I've heard people call it like it's too samey, like consistently throughout the album it sounds similar. But I think that's a funny thing, because when you spend time with it, you can start, like, it's almost like the fog starts to settle a little bit, and you can start to differentiate the different parts of the album. I think if you've never heard this album or an album like it, you could listen to it and be like, it's this kind of like cascade of things that sound similar coming at you. But the more you listen to it and you start to separate it, you're like, it actually is really nuanced, and there's a lot of interesting twists and turns along the way. So another question that we like to bat around here: who are this band's contemporaries, in this case Kevin Parker and Tame Impala? Who are, for you, when you're listening to this, who are Tame Impala's contemporaries?
Beck, because we say that for everyone. The Flaming Lips.
Okay, right, yeah.
My Morning Jacket. Thundercat.
Interesting. Yep.
And Martin Luke Brown. That's
Okay.
the indie guy from England that put out that
Yes.
album back in February that I got obsessed with for a little bit. But yeah, like those larger than life bass riffs remind me a lot of the Flaming Lips. How the bass just like gives you, you're like, the setting is almost like you're listening to hip hop or something, where
Right.
the bass is so prevalent and big. So the Flaming Lips jumped out to me immediately. Then when I think about the vocals, I've always thought Tame Impala and My Morning Jacket vocals sound similar with the falsetto, with the effects on the vocals, and yeah. But who did you come up with?
One of the things that I found most interesting was that you said the Flaming Lips, because that album was produced by a producer named Dave Fridman, and he had those drum sounds on that album that apparently Kevin Parker was pretty obsessed with. He also produced like MGMT's big album that came out a few years, like it came out in like 2007, and it also kind of, I think, shares some DNA. MGMT I would consider a contemporary as well, but Yoshimi, Battle for the Pink Robots, Dave Fridman produced that, and he also helped produce, at least co-produce some of the first two Tame Impala albums to help get that bombastic, all-encompassing drum sound. When I'm thinking about Currents specifically, or that later, mid and later stage Tame Impala, I do think about LCD Sound System, which is another band that we talk about constantly on this channel and is a contemporary for a lot of different artists. I think Gorillaz could probably be in there too. I also, for this era, I think maybe Neon Indian would be safe to include, and MGMT for previous stuff. For the earlier Tame Impala, Inner Speaker, Lonerism, I think Pawns is an obvious choice since there's some overlap in the live Tame Impala members. Some members of Pond also play with Tame Impala. Tame Impala does a James Murphy from LCD Sound System type of thing where he has, musicians that he likes to play live with, and he records everything himself. So the Ponds come to mind. Temples, King Gizzard, I think is another good example. So there are a lot of like potential ones, but you kind of have to pick your Tame Impala era as to where you're going to align him most closely. If Currents was a movie, what movie would Currents be?
It's a movie that you have used as a choice for another album, but I had to go with this one, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Interesting.
You know, kind of psychedelic movie. That's off the cuff and done in a different way, and the movie delves into self-awareness and relationships and love, and those are all topics that Currents deal with, so that was my movie choice.
It's great. It's like the quintessential breakup movie and the quintessential breakup album. I went with Drive from 2011. This neon soaked, melancholic, stylish, has this retro futuristic edge, and that killer synth soundtrack on Drive too.
I
What
love it.
band or artist would you like to hear cover Currents if they had a chance?
Okay, are you ready for this?
Are you
I
creating a band again?
No, I veered out of the
Okay.
drafting my own supergroup. But I did bring a band back from the dead, and it is Led Zeppelin.
Yes. Okay.
What if Led Zeppelin covered Currents? Could you imagine John Paul Jones just busting out these bass licks and
Yeah.
John Bonham ripping off these drum tracks? My goodness, that would be awesome.
You've blown my mind. I would love to hear that. I would love to hear Led Zeppelin cover this album in its entirety. Let's just have them cover every Tame Impala album while we're at it. That's amazing. I love that. I would pay so much money to see that. My choices are pretty boring by comparison. I thought it would be interesting to hear Spoon do this album.
I love
It's a
that.
be a little different for Spoon, but I think that's what would make it interesting. And then on the other hand, I'd like to hear Frank Ocean cover this. I think that would be an unexpected, but would kind of make total sense in a way to have Frank Ocean cover Currents.
Before I thought of the best cover band would be a 70s rock band and came up with Led Zeppelin, I thought about going a different avenue. What if somebody like Pharrell Williams or Justin Timberlake covered this album? I thought that would
you
be
know,
super cool.
it would be, because I think that, like, Kevin Parker talks about them, and listening to I think it's Justified is like an album that he talked about, and he was kind of interested in those types of sounds when doing this. So I think that, like, Kevin Parker would probably love to hear that, actually.
I hear that. I didn't know that before you said that, but I hear that in some of these tracks. So yeah, I would think that would be cool. I'm so sorry that I didn't say with Led Zeppelin, hearing Robert Plant
Oh
bust out
yeah.
these vocal lines too. That was another big selling point, is like, a lot of times when we think about who's going to cover the album, I'm thinking who can sing these vocal lines, and a lot of times that comes hard as a choice. Also, I love your choice of Spoon, because a lot of times Spoon is somebody I come up with just because I think Britt Daniel is so accomplished as a vocalist, and Spoon can just, they just, they're such good musicians that you just feel like they could accomplish whatever needs to be done.
It's so true. I feel like I could throw anything at Spoon and they would totally be able to cover it. They've covered so much ground in in their career. Like we have to talk about some more Spoon because I feel like they come up all the time on this channel. Okay, one of our favorite questions. If I mean, I guess we're just talking Kevin Parker here. If Kevin Parker was an athlete, was a professional athlete, who would Kevin Parker be?
You're gonna like this. I feel like I don't want to poo on any other answers, but this one might be the best. Kevin Parker is Andre Agassi.
Oh wow, I do love
And
this.
Andre Agassi, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, one of only 8 men to accomplish the career Grand Slam. Andre Agassi did it in a style that nobody had ever done it before. Because of his aggressive return of serve, nicknamed the Punisher. And so I just feel like Kevin Parker, just bust on the scene, says, you know what? Nobody's ever done it like this before, but this is how I'm going to do it. And when I get done, you're going to consider me one of the greatest rock and roll voices of all time. So uh, Kevin Parker or Tame Impala is Andre Agassi.
Yeah, dude, that's fucking sick. I prefer that. I definitely prefer that to my answer. But yeah, that's such a good one. Also, I mean, if you haven't read Andre Agassi's autobiography, boy, that guy went through some stuff in the 90s. Between like holding on to what was left of his hair and like, dabbling in hard drugs, while actively playing tennis. It's like some amazing stuff that's going on with Andre Agassi. And it's all out there. He lays it all bare in his autobiography. It's like an amazing book. Definitely encourage you to check that out. Now mine feels bored by comparison, but I still think this speaks to how highly I appraise Kevin Parker, which is to me Steph Curry. He's the Steph Curry of like the indie music world. Just like Steph revolutionized basketball with a 3-point shot, made finesse look effortless. Kevin Parker shifted the prominence of indie music with Currents. It's poppy, but still heady, vulnerable, confident, all produced and performed solo. Both are quiet disruptors, changed the game by perfecting their own unique style. So I went with Steph, but I prefer Agassi. Again, you did. I should have taken that answer first because you totally nailed it.
I do love the Steph Curry because that's what I was thinking of is like who did it different and change things because of the way they did it. And I think that's what you have to say about Tame Impala is it's very rare that somebody comes on the scene and uses a total different style where people say, I've never heard it done like that before. And then also still do it well enough where people say, oh, okay, this guy isn't a trick. He's not just using a trick. This guy's actually legitimate. And so I think Steph Curry is like that too.
And to throw it back to you, I think another reason I do like the Andre Agassi too is because like tennis is a solo sport, right? I mean, you play doubles, but like it's primarily known as a solo sport, and I do like that you have that going on with that one as well. So good choice. Just a final takeaway here to wrap things up. That brings us to the end. What any final takeaways from you on Currents?
I think I started hitting on it there is just, I uh obviously uh Tame Impala didn't make a big enough impression with me with Inner Speaker that I just became a giant fan and had to absorb everything that they did from that point on. So I would say before 3 weeks ago, I wasn't nearly as big a fan as I am now. I still don't know that I'm a gigantic Tame Impala fan, but definitely there are some tracks off this Currents album that I will never stop listening. They're going to be in my playlist from now on because there's just so gigantic and awesome songs. And so that because these songs have resonated with me so much, now I'm going to have to go back and check out all their other work to see what I've been missing. So I would say a final takeaway from Currents is Kevin Parker has just solidified himself as, a great songwriter and a great producer, and just a giant in the recording industry.
Absolutely. 100% agree with you. I think for indie heads like myself, Tame Impala was this gold standard before this album, and Currents was this really bold move. And what's remarkable is that Parker like single-handedly shot Tame Impala into the mainstream, and he didn't team up with Pharrell and go to LA to record with the band, as one might expect when they're going to do a more synth pop uh, album of this type of approach. He actually took on more of the burden and did everything himself, and he totally delivered. And there's just this whole generation of listeners for whom this is a defining album, and not just a defining breakup album, but a defining album, period. I think you're totally right. An amazing songwriter, an amazing producer, a great live. I saw Tame Impala in Nashville when they were touring off of Lonerism, and it was just pure psychedelic heaven. Totally blew me away. And then I saw him several years later back in Nashville, and he played at this venue called Ascend, which is like right off the river. It was a beautiful night, and it was more of the synth stuff, and it was a completely different vibe, but also really enjoyable, and just sort of this type of thing where you could also just let yourself kind of like follow what they're doing and just enjoy, kind of go along on the ride with Tame Impala. And it was a blast. Just like doing this was a blast with you, buddy. Thanks for listening to Currents with me. This has been a really fun 2 or 3 weeks. I'm really excited to see what Kevin Parker has in store, especially after the release of the latest single that they put out not that long ago, and to see where that journey takes him. Still a young dude, still a lot of good music left in the tank. At least I hope that that's the case, and I hope he keeps coming with it. If you liked this video, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It really does help us grow and encourages us to do more content like this. If you listen on podcast, follow us. And we want to know, are there albums that you want to hear us discuss? What are your thoughts on Currents in relation to the rest of Tame Impala's work? What was your journey listening to this album? Does it stand up as his greatest work, or are you a fan of the earlier stuff? Do you like it all? And also, what athlete is Kevin Parker? We definitely want to know the answer to those questions. Buddy, I appreciate it. This has been a blast, and we'll do it again soon.
Let's do it.